Record. I'm Peter DeMalley. I'm President of Design Professionals and one of the many steering committee members of this hallowed organization, LWL Hartford. That's the acronym, which stands for Live, Work, Love Hartford and its Knowledge Corridor region. Other steering committee members here are Dr. Tom Swar, who taught his last course, his last day at Yale today. Hey. We're going to celebrate that later. Thank you very much for Tom. Also, Jennifer Cassidy, who's Executive Director of Business for Downtown Hartford, and she's still an advocate for this Island Hill neighborhood. I'm going to say until she says otherwise. Jeff Stewart's in the back here. Jeff is on the team for Connecticut DOT, and he's also an advocate for Brainerd Airport, the oldest municipal airport in the United States, right? Yes, it is. Jim Boucher was here. Is he here?
Hey, someplace.
Yeah, Jim Boucher somewhere around here. Jim Boucher is an executive with Capital Workforce Partners, which is a workforce development board for the region, Hartford region. Yunil Teran from there she is. Yunil Teran, she's executive director of Center for Latino Progress on Park Street. And I think I covered everyone. That's our steering committee. But this organization, LWL Hartford, is just a figment of your imagination. We're really not a formal organization. We're just a bunch of friends who get together once a month for a speaker, some networking. We don't have a penny to our name. We like it. Don't try to give us $1 because then we have to track it. We wouldn't appreciate that. But for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been having a featured speaker on a timely topic right in downtown Hartford. And we've been doing so every month on the last Wednesday of the month, January through October, and usually a week or two early during the holiday season, November and December. And so we've been doing it every month for the last 5-6 years, and we've been enjoying it, and we've all been learning a lot from our speakers, and we value them. We also like to thank Spotlight Theaters at 39 Front Street, who is sponsoring this event tonight, hosting it. They've done that many times in the past. And we'd like to thank Trina Gallo, Tyler, Lindsay, and other staff members here who make it possible, including their IT people. And also we'd like to thank HPA-TV. HPA-TV, Hartford Public Access Television, is filming this event tonight for rebroadcast so it can reach a wider audience. We thank Gil Martinez and his staff for that. One announcement, a couple announcements. I think Mike McGarry, did you pass out your programs?
Yeah.
And what's the title of that? This. A Guide for New Residents and Visitors for Greater Hartford that we're looking at over during the networking portion of our program this evening. And recommend that you do take a look at this valuable program. These celebrating Hartford and its region, immediate region. And also I'd like to bring your attention tomorrow morning at Goodwin College. You can still register, I believe, for that event. There's an event sponsored by New England's Knowledge Corridor Partnership, of which I'm on the board. And that is the title of the event is called Mayors Meet Millennials. And the purpose of the program is to address the issue of how to retain and to attract young millennial workers for the Knowledge Corridor region, which is Metro Hartford, Springfield, New Haven, which is the 20th largest market in the United States, comparable in size to Denver and St. Louis. And we have a growing silver tsunami, demographic tsunami, whatever you want to call it. We have an aging workforce. We need to replace them with trained, skilled workforce. And how do we don't have enough people here to do that. We have to attract and retain as many people as we can to get that done. So there are going to be 2 forums, one with 5 big city mayors, including mayors of Hartford, Springfield, Chicopee, East Hartford, and New Britain this time around. And they'll be on a panel discussion about what they're doing for the economy and how to attract and retain the young workforce. And then the second panel is going to be composed of representatives from the young professionals organizations in Northampton, Springfield, Hartford, New Haven, and there may be some other groups as well. And I think about 6 panelists on that, as well as Don Klepper-Smith, who's a regional economist, who will be talking about the overall economy and specifically focusing on the issue of replacement workforce. So we'll be into that tomorrow morning at Goodwin College. Goodwin College is hosting it, and it's being sponsored by Farmington Bank. So it's a free event. If you haven't registered, please do, bright and early tomorrow morning, and it will be going on, be ending around 11 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's a great program, timely topic, and I encourage you to attend if you're so inclined, you have the time. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our speaker for tonight. David Rosado is the brand new Hartford Police Chief. His credentials are incredible. I've read of them. Let me give you a little highlight. He's going to be addressing his vision for the goals for his department, the Hartford Police Department, and also for the city of Hartford. He's newly appointed as Chief of Police here, and he will share his vision for Hartford and its goals for the department, as I mentioned. He's a Hartford native, which is fantastic. He knows the community very well from his early years up. He's a graduate of University of Connecticut and also the FBI Academy. And he was the first Latino to be promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Connecticut State Police, and he held many different leadership positions in the Connecticut State Police. And from what I can see, and I've seen him at least one other presentation in the Northeast neighborhood, he's going to be terrific. So without further ado, let's welcome David Rosado, the new Chief of Police for City of Hartford.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening. So I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. Take it easy on me, especially you, Melvin. I know about you. No, I'm very happy to see all of you. I do not have any prepared remarks. I was told to keep it informal, which I will. I'll just try to be brief as possible, so that I allow enough time for your tough questions, which I always enjoy. I see some friends from the state police as well, Dane Silcox, and friends from DOT. Good to see state employees here again. So anyways, my name is David Rosado. Yes, I was born in the city of Hartford, born and raised Charter Oak Terrace, south end of Hartford. I'm a proud graduate, not to mention my graduate degrees, but of Hartford Public Schools. That's also near and dear to me, more important. I'm a proud graduate of Mary Hooker School in the South End, Alfred E. Burr, and Buckley High School. So that's very important. So I'm asked, all of the time. I'm asked pretty often from inside and from outside the department. Hey, listen, you come from the state police. What do you know about Hartford? What do you know about Hartford policing? It's totally different. It's municipal policing. But I can tell you one thing right off the bat. Policing is policing. I get that. But I've walked in the shoes of Hartford residents. I've walked in the shoes of not having the resources, whether it's educational, whether it's finances, whether it's food on the table. We've struggled growing up in the city. I've been there, I've done that. I know the frustrations that our residents struggle with on a daily basis. That right there is the credentials that you need to start with. I just wanted to put that out there. I think that's very important. So, born and raised in the city, I went to UConn as an undergrad. I thought I was going to play for the Yankees. Didn't happen for me. I was recruited, but I was not good enough. Not big enough. You have to be 6'5" nowadays to even be looked at. But, so I decided that I was going to do something else in life. And one little caveat. So growing up in the city of Hartford, as kids who grew up in the city, I think the last thing in the world they think they're going to be are police officers. At least in my day and age, just wasn't happening. I grew up in Charter Oak Terrace. I thought my interactions at the time, I didn't have many. My brothers and sisters did. I was the youngest of 8. There were many interactions between my family and police, not always the best interactions. So the last thing in the world is you think about is being a police officer. So one day I'm a senior up at UConn. I lived in my senior year, I lived in Sprague. I lived in the jungle for 3 years. For anyone who knows UConn, I lived in the jungle. But my senior year, I lived in Sprague, and an RA came to visit me one day. Mind you, I'm a college student. My RA knocks on my door and he says, "There's 2 federal agents downstairs." So I look, what did I do? I don't think I did anything when I was up at UConn. So sure enough, there were 2 Secret Service agents downstairs. They actually happened to be there on a recruiting trip. And at the time, back when I was in college, which was a long time ago, they were looking for Spanish-speaking candidates, and they were recruiting, and they were from New York City, and they made their way to Storrs, Connecticut. That's what opened my eyes to law enforcement. They said, listen, they described the job to me, and they said, this is what we're looking for, but have you thought about getting some law enforcement experience? Because you're young, and we like to look for experience. That's what precipitated law enforcement for me. That's what started my career, being a local officer for a short period of time. I worked in between the local police department. I worked for an insurance company where I was a financial underwriter. So, and I think that's important to mention that in this type of setting, because to be a manager nowadays, you have to wear many different hats. And it's not only policing, it's operations, administration, but you also have to know the business community. I worked for an insurance company as an underwriter for 3 years, traveled the country, was a financial underwriter. So I know my way around a financial statement, income statements, things of that nature. So that's important to know. But as I was doing insurance at the right age of 23, 24, 25, just wasn't for me. I felt that calling. I wanted to come back to law enforcement. So going back to my story with the Secret Service, I applied to the Secret Service and the state police. The first one that called, they both called. The first one that called was the state police in January of '98. And that's what started my career in law enforcement. As Pete stated, I moved up. I had various different assignments. I'm proud to say it was a great organization. Not long ago, when the city reached out to me and said, listen, would you consider coming back to the city? That was out of left field for me. I was a little shocked. I was humbled. But I thought it was important to let my current boss know, the commissioner of the state police. And I had to go talk to her. And she said to me, well, I don't want you to leave. I want you to be the colonel, the first Hispanic colonel of the state police. And this is true. So now, my entire career, I thought about going up, and this is what I was focused on. That's all I was focused on. If NYPD called, if Boston called, I would have said no. But the one city that could cause me to stop and think about it was my home city, was Hartford. So I think that's an important point for you to know. This is how much this means to me, to come back home to my city, to this city that, it's beautiful to me and means so much to me. And that's how much this opportunity meant to me. And, I think, Dane Silcox, who works for state police, knows my role over there, and he knows how much it meant to me to come here. So that's important. I think that's important to know. So anyway, so now I'm here. What are my priorities? There's operational priorities, there's administrative priorities. The first thing I had to do, we have a staffing problem, and I'm not a big mic guy, so am I too close to the mic or no?
I think you're fine.
Okay. Staffing, I had to look at the staffing of the agency. We all know that staffing is a problem in the Hartford Police Department. In our heyday, we were 500 plus officers in this police department. Just a couple months back, we were in the threes. Thankfully, we just had a class that graduated. The mayor's very committed to staffing. The city council's committed to staffing. They're supportive of getting our staffing up. We just graduated a class about a month ago, 20 candidates. I'm proud to say 50% were minority. That's huge in law enforcement. That was prior to my time. I'm not taking credit for it, but I want you to know that 50% of the candidates were minority. There's a current class in the academy now that started 4 weeks ago, 50% minority. That's our commitment to having a police department that reflects the population that we serve. We are also on schedule, after this class graduates in June, to start another class in July. And then after that, another class in January. We are committed to our staffing to get that staffing up. In the meantime, what are we doing? So the weather's getting warm. I've been to just about every NRZ meeting. In every NRZ meeting, folks ask, rightfully, what are you doing? What are your initiatives? What are you going to do to quell this problem that we have, these quality of life issues, the traffic complaints, you name it. So I can't stand before you and talk about staffing as I can't use it as an excuse. I have to do something. So this is what we're doing. We put a very small initiative together, and this is going to be something that's on top of what we're doing as a police department already. And that initiative we finally call within the police department the CREW, which is the Community Response Unit. And we specifically named this small unit the Community Response Unit for a reason, because it's intended to respond to your concerns and what you are looking for in a police department. At this point in time, it's going to be very small. It's going to be 1 sergeant and 4 officers. And they are going to be flexible, and they are going to be responsive to the community. And what do I mean by that? If the North End calls and says, you know, we have folks who are littering on this particular neighborhood, and they're throwing trash, and they're just hanging out and loitering, well, we can take this specific unit over to that area, have them concentrate on that area for a week or 2, and quell that problem. If the business district calls us and says, you know, we have a lot of panhandlers on Main Street, and they're bothering our commuters, they're bothering our workers, they're bothering our residents, we can take this small unit and we can then divert them over to the Main Street area and deal with that problem, and so on and so forth. And it is our hope that as our staffing gets up, if this model takes off and it's successful and the community enjoys it, then we hope to increase that program. Within the organization, I've done some reorganization with the table of organization. I apologize for using that word 3 times in one sentence. And what does that entail? So basically, when you run an organization, you have a responsibility to be efficient. That means administration, operations. The organization that existed prior to my term, it had pros and cons. Some of those cons I cleaned up. I've had the opportunity to move things around and make things clean so that there's a clear chain of command within the police department, so that officers know who reports to who, and the reporting structure is clear and explicit. Within that organization, I was also able to make 2 promotions. Well, one hire from outside and 1 promotion from within. And my commitment was not only to bring in recruits who are reflective of the population, but our entire organization, all the way up to the top, should be reflective of the population. You should not see 8 white males as chiefs. You should not see 8 white females or 8 Hispanic males. It should be diverse. It should be diverse in terms of gender, race, whatever it may be. That is my commitment. So with that being said, prior to me coming on, our chiefs, I think were about 20%. Currently, within all of the chiefs, we're at 50% minority representation. I had the good fortune to promote a woman, an African-American woman, to the position of deputy chief, and she was not promoted because she was African-American. She was not promoted because she's a female. She was promoted because she was the most qualified person, and that was just a bonus. That's our commitment to diversity. The last component I'd like to talk to you about is technology. So I'm taking a holistic look at the agency, and I'm looking to see what we can do better as an agency. First thing we can do to be more transparent to the community is to increase our trust with the community. And I think there's a great relationship, by the way, right now. My job is to foster it and to make it better. Is technology. It's body-worn cameras. So we are seeing what's happening across the country now. We're seeing what's happened recently in Sacramento, what's happened in Ferguson, what's happened in Baltimore. Thankfully, nothing like that has happened here in the city. However, if anything ever does happen, I want to make sure that we're in a position of trust and not a position of distrust to start that dialogue. And one of the things we can do is to bring body-worn cameras. In this day and age, we need transparency. We need to be able to open the doors, and we need for you to know everything we're doing as an organization, everything we're doing as a police department. And body-worn cameras helps with that. I'm not going to tell you that it changes behaviors. I don't have statistical evidence to tell you that is going to change behaviors, but at least you know that whatever we do as an organization is going to be open for observation and for view. And technology now is advanced so much that here's a little intricacy for technology. There are certain vendors out there that can actually integrate all of your technology. So in other words, body-worn cameras, tasers, in-car cameras can all talk to each other. And we can bring in technology that is automatic and takes a decision away from an officer. Not that I, as a police chief, do not trust an officer, that they wouldn't activate their cameras during a certain use of force incident, for example, but I want that decision. I don't want an officer to worry about that decision. I want an officer to worry about the situation at hand and make the technology turn on automatically. And how does that work? So, for example, you could have all of your technologies talking to each other. So if there's a use of force incident and there's 4 of us, there's 4 officers involved. One officer unholsters his or her host taser. Everything goes on for that officer. Their body-worn camera, the in-car camera. Not only that, however, think about this. Every other officer who's in a certain perimeter of that officer, all of their cameras go on and all of the cars go on automatically. Now you have an incident that's better captured and it's open for the public to see. That's the type of technology that I'm looking to bring forward to the police department and make us more transparent to the community. The very last thing I want to talk to you about is accountability. My mission for our police department is to be servant leaders. This is my job as a chief, to be a servant leader to the department, a servant leader to you as the community. You are, and I don't say this lightly, you are my boss, right? You are the boss of the police department. We serve you. That is the culture, that is the mindset that I am stressing to the officers. Gone are the days where an officer feels he or she can talk down to the community just because you wear a badge. It's not going to happen while I'm here. I back my officers when they do the right thing. I do not when they don't. I hold them accountable. With that being said, I want you to hold us accountable. You know, we have this NRZ program where officers every month go to the different meetings and they stand before the community and they talk about stats, they talk about crimes, and they talk about how they're going to put in strategies to quell that. But the very fact that an officer is standing before a community member and being accountable, that is a success story by itself. You can go, and I've been, in over 20 years, I've been across the country to many different organizations, many different cities, and I can tell you that the level of accountability that the police department shares with the community far surpasses what you see out there. And I've been in an NRZ meeting not too long ago, in Parkville, actually, and this officer faced tough questions, and community members were upset. You know, you said this and you said this, but we're still experiencing this. And what are you going to do? And that officer stood there and he took it, and he answered the questions. You know, you may not like the answers that the officers are giving you, but at least they're standing there before you and giving you answers. Again, you're not going to experience that across the country. You should be proud of that, proud of the relationship, and I'm proud of the level of community engagement that the city has. It's opened my eyes. Little personal note, my wife, my college sweetheart, we have 3 little ones at home. We have a daughter up in college studying architecture, and I've been away from the city for a couple years, but we're coming back into the city. We're going to move into the city in about a month's time. But just going around the city, growing up as a kid in the South End, obviously you never know the level of commitment that the community has. My eyes have been opened, just hearing the care, the compassion, and the level of love that folks have for the city itself. And that makes me happy, and I'm happy to be back in the city, and I'm proud to be here. And I ask each and every one of you here, if you have a complaint about us, hold me accountable, call me. I will return your phone call. I usually reserve the end of the day to return calls, but I will call you back. I am here to serve you and to be answerable to you. Little personal note, I'm having coffee with the chief, little program that I'm doing every month, where I'm going to have a small focus group, 7 to 8 people, and sit down and just have a more intimate conversation about the issues in the city. And my commitment is I'll pay for the coffee. I'm not going to buy donuts, but I'll buy the coffee. So if anyone here is interested in having coffee in a more focused setting, please reach out to me or to the police department, and we'll set it up. With that being said, I'll open it up to questions, but thank you for your time.
If we could just use the mic for these.
Chief, I knew your predecessor pretty well, and he once informed me that in August he had literally thousands of overtime and private jobs, and with a small force. Is the huge wave in the summertime of private jobs and overtime jobs, does that affect not only the morale, but the physical ability of your force to do the job they're supposed to do, which would be a cop first? It seems to me that if you had 2,500 jobs and only 250 cops eligible to do it, that meant these guys are working all the time, day and night. Is that safe? Is that feasible? And how can you possibly ameliorate the problem?
Right. That's a great question I haven't heard in quite a while. But there's supervisory checks and balances put in place. Can I speak away from that, or do I need to speak?
We can hear you.
You can hear me? You just need me because of the mic?
Yeah, because of the taping.
Okay,
If you
great.
could speak into the mic.
I will. So there are supervisory checks and balances put in place for an officer. So you can't work a certain amount of hours consecutive if it impairs your ability to do your job. So there are checks and balances put in place. I hear your concern. Staffing is an issue. Absolutely. We are committed to getting that staffing up. One of the challenges that we face as an agency, and I think it's not specific to the Hartford Police Department, but it's across the country, is there's a challenge to recruit very good qualified candidates. They're not showing up in the numbers that they have years ago. Back in the day when I joined the state over 20 years ago, for a class of 80 recruits, there were 18,000 applicants. 18,000. Now we're lucky, DC Foley, I think you could probably attest to this, if we get 200 applicants, we're lucky for a class of 20.
I was in the Civic Center, we had our test when I took it 24 years
Right.
ago. We couldn't fill this room right now.
Right. So the challenge, there's a challenge out there. It's not an excuse. Everyone faces that, and we recruit everywhere. We're employing different recruiting techniques to get our staffing up. But again, the commitment is there. Strategies are in place to get that up. But it's a great question. Thank you for that.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the time to sit with us and answer our questions and tell us your story. And so a couple things. The face of law enforcement has had a light shined on it recently, and I assume that, and I hear from what you said, I hear that you're on that. The challenges involved with that, and we are thankful that some of those confrontations that we've seen across the country haven't occurred here. And I congratulate you for the recent arrests of the ATV and the bike riders. I think that's a huge step forward, and to hear that they're from out of state, I think opens a lot of people's eyes to what's going on. And I don't know. I hope you crush the bikes and the ATVs and confiscate the pickup truck or whatever. I mean, we don't need to see them return, and I think it sends a great message. I live in the South End on Alden Street, and I've been there for 13 years, and I'm pretty sure that fireworks are still illegal in Connecticut, but around the 4th of July, starting after Memorial Day, it sounds like I live in a war zone. I haven't called, it hasn't been that much of an issue, but it will be when someone gets really hurt or killed because of these. We're talking aerial displays that compete with the commercial ones that we might see, in other parts of the city. So I'll call you. I will be calling you about that. But again, thanks for all that you're doing, and look forward to your a long career here in Hartford.
Thank you. So let me address, first of all, I apologize for not bringing up ATVs, and I should have. And that is probably one of the most consistent complaints that I've heard out there. And if you saw, we put out, and I thought it was important to put out what we did to send a message, because here's my message, and I said it in front of the camera with the mayor standing next to me, not in our city. And that's my commitment to this particular problem. It's a nuisance. They're terrorizing our city. I hate to say it that way, but that's what it's like. I hate to imagine anyone sitting in their front lawn and having to deal with someone coming up onto their lawn, literally. But here's what we did. So it's not a Hartford problem. It's a regional problem, it's a statewide problem, and actually it goes across the country as well. Through my contacts with other law enforcement agencies, we were able to bring regional partners together, other local police departments, the state police, as well as the Department of Homeland Security with a helicopter to do aerial view of these folks. It involves scraping social media to see where they're staging, where they're ending up, and being smart about your policing. But we sent a message on Monday. We seized 14 vehicles, which were ATVs, dirt bikes, trailers, U-Hauls. We arrested 10 individuals. As you stated, 9 were not from the city of Hartford, 8 were from out of state, 4 from Massachusetts, 3 from Rhode Island. That's just not acceptable. But we sent the message, not in our city. It was a multi-pronged effort, including technology, being smarter. We're not going to chase these ATVs. We're not going to endanger you, but we are going to deal with the problem. And then that was just the beginning. We're going to stay on top of that. With regard to the fireworks, we can employ state police. I got a buddy back there. Maybe their fire and explosion and investigation unit could come out and take care of that problem for you. But talk to your CSO as well, so that we know the problems in your particular neighborhoods, and I know you are, and we will address those. And again, we have this new community response unit that will be up and running by the summertime. That could be another initiative for them.
Okay, in the front here.
Good evening. I'd like to follow up on that. I think there are a lot of quality of life issues that are being pushed onto the police department. You can take littering, the fact that we don't stop our red lights anymore, and it just goes on and on. And these are social issues that we're asking the police to pick up. And I'm thinking that really conflicts with what I'd like you to be doing, is focusing on crime. So what, as the community, can we do to really help make your job easier and try to pick up, I think, some of the pressure on these social issues?
That's great. Talk to us. Give us information. It's easier said than done. For example, ATVs. Some folks are scared to call the police and say, hey, my neighbor has an ATV who's terrorizing the neighborhood. There's ways to do that. If you are afraid yourself to give us a call, ask another community leader who is not afraid to just share that information. Or you as a community member could call us and say, listen, I'd really rather not have an officer come to my house and give me undue attention. However, you may want to know this, and we can address it that way. But just the give and take, the talking, caring, that is how you can help. Yeah, I understand. We have, I'm dealing with, shots fired and you name it, burglaries, robberies. But the quality of life issue is important to me as well. We have to do everything. We have to be smarter. We can utilize all of our tools, if you would, to try to quell those problems as best as we could. Again, staffing is an issue, but it's not an excuse. We do, but we can work with other agencies. There are times when you can address a panhandling problem by, instead of arresting your way out of the problem, getting services to a particular person. Maybe there's a service shortage that this person may need. But there's, if you work in partnership with other agencies, and we do that. We work in partnership with other agencies so that it's not only a police problem. It's parents, it's education, I can go on, and as we all know, but I hear you, sir.
Gentleman over here.
Hi, Chief. Thanks for coming. I remember at the first ComStat meeting you were at, before you became the chief, Umbrella's last one, he brought up a kind of a predictive crime software. I know you've been getting lots of flack for some of the drone stuff, but I want to know if you can speak to that software, to what it's going to be used for, how it's going to be implemented, and as far as, I trust sort of the CompStat has protections, but can you also speak to the preventative things that are being used to prevent it from hacking, especially with these drones, you know, even if we can trust the police to use it well. I know a lot of people are afraid that, as well as the predictive crime software, if you can speak to that and sort of the protections in place.
Sure. So it's called CrimeScape, I believe it is, the software you're referring to, and it's pretty much gathering stats as to where crime has happened in the past, and utilizing that software to try to predict where crime is going to happen. And it's pretty much, it's not capturing information on folks. We're not gathering or storing information on folks. You're literally analyzing the information that you already have to see where are your shootings happening predominantly, at what times of day are they happening. And when you have this information before you, you can be better at staging officers in hotspots to bring that down. So that is pretty much the Reader's Digest of CrimeScape. With regard to the security features, before a police department, before we bring that on in the RFP process, when you deal with vendors, that is all vetted out. I can't tell you the specific security features within that specific program. However, that's part of the vetting process through the RFP procedure with the city, if that helps.
We had a question in the rear with respect to the opioid epidemic and what your vision for the department in addressing that epidemic. And I do think it has to involve interfacing with other agencies. Yes. You can't do it all. There's no way the Hartford Police Department can do it all.
It's, with all of society's problems, opioid has been at the top for the past couple years. One little silver lining, if there is one, is it's actually gone down a little bit from last year, the opioid crisis. However, we currently now, the Hartford Police Department, do not carry Narcan. That's carried through the fire department. But yes, attacking that problem, it's dealing with social service agencies, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, for example, in the state. It's working with other agencies to identify root causes of the drug addiction. Instead of arresting your way out of a problem, diverting folks, but it deals with working with the prosecutor's office. Tom O'Brien in community court has been great. He's been a partner of ours, and he's willing to look at programs where we can screen folks out of being arrested and diverted to services. So that's how you do that. You work with social services, you work with mental health and addiction services. Everyone is different. Everyone has different needs. There are folks who become addicted because of a sports injury. It does not affect, it's not just a city problem. I was at an NRG, I think you were at it, where the folks in this particular neighborhood, they said, why is it only in our neighborhood? And it's not. It's not only in the city of Hartford, but it's a statewide problem. It's in the most rural areas of the state. About a year and a half ago in my prior job, I can tell you of one particular case where an individual in the most rural part of the state overdosed. Narcan was administered, that person was revived, brought to the hospital. The next day, the person was out on the street again and overdosed again. So, I mean, that's a loaded question, but it's not just a police question or a police issue. It's an issue for the medical field. It's an issue for everyone. But that's what we're doing.
Yes, one.
Since you're in the area of drugs, soon we're going to have a big casino up north. Soon we're going to have marijuana sold over the counter in Massachusetts. People are going to go up in certain elements of society, they're going to go up and gamble, buy marijuana, use it, and drive back to Hartford. Now, there's a lot of illegal marijuana, as you know, in the city now. But once it's over the counter for anybody, and there are very few tests, you know a lot more than I do, on impaired driving. Do you have any idea of the problem we're going to get and how you're going to solve it? Obviously, we're going to get a problem. We're going to have trains going to Springfield. We're spending billions, I guess, on trains in Springfield. But So they're gonna go to Springfield, they're gonna gamble, they're gonna buy marijuana, come back to Hartford in much larger numbers than we have now, because it'll be legal up there. And they're gonna drive, and they're gonna be around the neighborhoods. So is that something you're looking at and facing now?
So, I'm not going to address the legislative issue of, legalizing marijuana. However, I can tell you that, we currently take any crime that is a crime, we enforce it. I can't try to predict what's going to happen if marijuana is legalized or not. I can only address what we're dealing with now and try to handle the problems we have now. I hate to think about what happens if that happens, but I'm not a politician. I can only deal with what's on the books now, if you will.
At one point, I heard from some people that if we didn't have suburbanites coming into Hartford to buy their illicit drugs, that a lot of the violence we have in the city would be diminished considerably. A lot of the drug trafficking would be diminished considerably, and it might help resolve a lot of the problems we have. Are you finding that a lot of suburbanites do come into the city?
It happens. It happens. Absolutely. It happens. They come from everywhere, not only from suburbanites, from out of state as well. But I can tell you that we have a very active Vice Intelligence and Narcotics Unit that works operations nonstop. And the hard part about it is I get the question, well, listen, this is happening over here. What are you doing about it? A lot of the work that they do is behind the scenes. Obviously, it's undercover work. There's a long process. We not only go after the street level dealers, if you will, we try to take down organizations. We try to take down drug trafficking organizations. And it's a concerted effort between local, state, and federal. Federal partners are huge in this. The FBI, the DEA, the ATF, they're in the city. They're working hand in hand with us. We have New England HIDA, which handles, there's federal funding for these types of investigations that we participate in. These are very long, intensive investigations, but they happen at all times. But to answer your question, yes, it does happen. Yes, they come into the city. And obviously, if you're buying drugs, you're contributing to the problem of the city.
Question up here.
I knew it was coming. Eventually.
Hey, Chief, how you doing?
Good.
I'm really happy to see you actually in Hartford. My brother was a 20-year veteran of the Connecticut State Police, so dear my heart. So I have two questions related to transparency. And I was actually encouraged to see your tour and hear you consistently talk about transparency. Hartford Police Department right now is backlogged by about 43 to 50 different open records requests. And there's one officer that's responsible for all of those open records requests, which means that advocates, attorneys, folks with active cases with misconduct are waiting 6 to 7 to 8 months. And that seems to me as a clear decision by the department to not add extra staff to the open records department to answer those questions, to answer those requests earlier. So for example, like Hartford Yard-Go Stadium, there's overtime for that kind of work, but not necessarily for the open records request. So what's your plan for that? The second question is, I was on the radio with this handsome young gentleman over here, Deputy Chief Foley on WNPR, and he mentioned that the department is going to be taking on BriefCam as a analytical software for the real-time crime center. The concern that I have is that on April 3rd, BriefCam issued a press release announcing its newest, I guess you would call it, features. And one of those features that are part of its rapid review and search, which is what the department would intend to use, those new features would include, directly from the press release, face recognition and appearance similarity extend to BriefCam's rapid search capabilities, while case management investigation reports streamline investigator workflow. Now, Deputy Chief said the department is committed to not taking out facial recognition. How is that going to happen if you're taking out BriefCam and that's implemented into the software?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. So the first question with regard to the FOI situation, we currently have a class that just graduated, as you know, as I mentioned earlier. They're currently on what we call field training, the FTO program. They're riding with a more experienced officer before they can ride alone. Once these folks are out on the street, it gives me a little bit more leeway, and that's one of the considerations. I know that the detective, she's actually been in my office, and she's made that very same case. There is a backlog. There's no denying it. That's on my list, but I can tell you I have every other unit in the police department also has vacancies, but that's on there. So there's a plan, and I hear you on that. Now, with regard to facial recognition, that's not on my agenda. That's not on the game plan for our command center in the technology package that we roll out. Now, BriefCam lists that as a feature. Doesn't mean that we have to turn that feature on, okay? And that is not the game plan to turn that feature on to utilize facial recognition.
I can clarify a little bit more. So I asked my guys, because I was lying to you, and that's what I was told, no facial recognition. So the guy said, well, BriefCam is coming out with a product like that. And I said, so we're gonna have facial recognition? They said, well, not as they think it is facial recognition. They have the ACLUs using the same facial recognition, is what he said. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, if they're holding an iPhone in their hands, that's the same type of software that BriefCam is going to use. If they use Facebook, if they use Google, they all have this software that some people call facial recognition. What will prevent us from using it as facial recognition on our cameras are 20 feet off the ground. And again, this is a technical guy giving it to an investigator here who's not much far beyond Atari. So I'm just trying to explain it to you as best I can, but we are going to get you everything you asked for. Our cameras are 20 feet off the ground. Making facial recognition in this day and age inoperable. And it's not something the chiefs pursued, the previous chiefs pursued, or I pursued. I'd love to tell you no, but you found the thing that says BriefCam has a technology that's similar to that. But our cameras are 20 feet off the ground. They cannot do facial recognition as you would think that it was, where it recognizes the face and tells us that's somebody. The second part of that, we would need to do that would be photographs to blow back against, and that would be the DMV database. We have no interest in that. We haven't requested that, and we don't want that. There may come a day where there is a way to use it at, say, bus stops against the sex offender registry, where we have their pictures. Again, we would do it on open source if we wanted to. That is not in our plans in the immediate future. That's what you hear in law enforcement circles, is how it can be safely used in a community to build trust, and or not to create fear or that we're spying on people. But again, we don't have the database. The cameras are 20 feet off the ground, and I'm sorry that what I told you that day wasn't a lie. It's just, again, the technical aspect isn't my strong point, but the software is comparable to what all social media uses, or your Apple iPhone uses. Is the same that BriefCam has. But I enjoyed working with you, Melvin. You're a good guy, and I love answering your questions.
Okay. How many sworn officers do you believe you're going to have once you have these upcoming classes complete their training?
So the big question mark is how many retire in June. So we have approximately 35 officers who are eligible for retirement at the end of June, which for a department of our size, that would hurt us. That would hurt us bad. We are currently on pace. We're at about 402 now. We're currently on pace. If we, again, it all varies on how many retire, but we hope to get over in the mid fours by next year, meaning 2019, if we get these classes to roll out and we get some quality candidates in there. But again, everything is dependent on what happens in June.
We're done with questions? Thank you very much, Chief.
All right.
It was a wonderful presentation.
I just want to say, I'd like to end any talk I have with, I really do value hearing the good and the bad. So I value the constructive criticism probably more so than the good criticism, because it makes us better. So please throw it at me. I'm always receptive to hearing more, and I thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. That was great.
Just a reminder, tomorrow morning, if you haven't registered already, Mayors Meet Millennials at Goodwin College, sponsored by New England Knowledge Quarter Partnership and Farmington Bank. Hopefully you can attend. There'll be about 200 people in attendance there. Identify what measures we can take to attract and retain the young workforce. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.